I'm Roxana Dean, President of the League of Women Voters of the Comal Area. Welcome to this panel discussion on current immigration issues and the Texas legislature. The Comal Area League serves Comal and Guadalupe counties. We envision a democracy in which every person has the desire, the right, the knowledge, and the confidence to participate. The League is proud to be nonpartisan, neither supporting nor opposing candidates or political parties at any level of government, but always working on vital issues of concern to members and the public. Anyone 16 years and older may join the League. It is not for women only. Please visit our website at lwvcomal.org for more information. Everyone should be muted and have your video turned off because this will make a smoother meeting. You can type questions into the chat, or if you are watching this on Facebook, you can write your questions as comments. The recording of this will be on the Comal League's YouTube channel. I'd like to introduce Gloria Suarez-Sasser, a founder of the Comal Area League and current Texas State League Immigration Issue Chair. She will speak and will introduce the other panelists. Thank you, Gloria.
Thank you, Roxana. Before we go on to our panel, I have some news, and I would like to introduce some of the committee members for the update. I also chaired the Immigration Update Committee, and we were really fortunate in Comal Area because when we said we need people, we had some of our members volunteer. So Chili was one of our members. Chili kind of waved. And Daphne. And also, Ada isn't here. Ada Connell, who also, and they contributed really greatly to the immigration study. We met on Monday. I met with the state board on Monday, and we answered questions. And so I'm really happy to let you know, because this has been I get asked this question almost at every board meeting. So how's the immigration thing going? Have they passed it yet? And the board approved the immigration update proposed by the committee. In March, we'll have a statewide meeting to approve, and they'll vote to approve the update or not. And so please keep an eye out for that announcement. It will be a Zoom meeting, so everybody can participate. Won't matter what the weather's like. It'll be wonderful. This is a really important issue. We all come from immigrants. We're all, this country was formed by immigrants. And so making sure that our immigrant population is treated fairly is extremely important. We're really fortunate today that we have a couple of really expert people in this area. Linda Wassennich will be our first speaker. And I'm really happy to see her, because at one point she said, if I don't make it because I have an appointment, I don't get there in time, you're going to have to read it. And I went, okay. I even printed it out, Linda. I am good. But Linda is she runs the I lost my place here, the Immigration Discussion Group for LWVUS. She's also a former state and national board member. I actually served with Linda for 5 years. I learned a lot from her, and I really appreciate her friendship. And also, she is a member of the LWV Dallas League. So Linda?
You ready for me to start?
Are you ready? Yes.
Okay, very good.
Yes, ma'am.
When Gloria called and asked me or emailed and asked me to participate on this panel, it didn't matter what she wanted me to talk about. I would have said yes for Gloria. So don't hold me to that in the future, but this time I'm really glad to do this. And what I found interesting was in looking, she asked me to talk about the national position. And if you look at the national position, and when we studied immigration in Texas, some things fall into place, and it begins to make not sense in the way that we would like it to be, but begin to understand where some of the snafus have shown up. This may come out as a kind of a partisan report, but I think I've pretty much stuck to the facts. So let's start by reviewing a bit of League history regarding its studies on immigration. The Texas League studied immigration beginning in 1995, and we had reached consensus, which in 1996, and it was approved by the board in 1997. And then the world changed in 2001, 9/11 to be exact. The Department of Homeland Security was created to bring a number of different offices together in the federal government that had been scattered among several different departments and bring them into one department. You remember there was some concern that some people knew something was happening, but they didn't, quote, connect the dots. You remember that phrase? Well, in 2006, at the National League Convention, delegates voted to study immigration nationwide. The study materials were distributed in 2007. Consensus was reached, which led to a position being approved by the National Board in 2008. In practice, changes evolved rather slowly. From 2001 to 2008, when LWVUS concluded it, that's a typo. From 2006 to 2008, when LWVS concluded its study of immigration, most of the egregious immigration laws had not been introduced. Barack Obama, who was president from 2009 to 2017, that's not right either. Yeah, that is right, because election to 2016, his term ended January 2017, was known as the deporter-in-chief, and actually had very little impact on immigration aside from the increased number of deportations. But changes began to accumulate in 2017 when Donald Trump became president, and many seem to have lost sight of the immigrant as a human being. Our positions were developed after the catastrophe of 9/11, but suddenly they didn't seem as relevant as before. The Office of Immigration and Naturalization Services became the Office of Immigration and Customs Enforcement. Remember hearing about the INS, Immigration and Naturalization Services? Now we have Immigration and Customs Enforcement. There is a difference in those terms. The U.S. position started with the following. The League believes that immigration policies should promote reunification of immediate family members, meet the economic, business, and employment needs of the U.S., be responsive to those facing political persecution or humanitarian crisis, be made for qualified persons to enter the U.S. on student visas, and ensure that all persons receive fair treatment under the law. The League supports federal immigration law that provides an efficient system with minimal or no backlogs for legal entry of immigrants into the U.S. To complement these goals, the League supports federal policies to improve economies, education, job opportunities, and living conditions in nations with large immigrating populations. This is a very important point because many people feel that the root of immigration is what's going on in the country of origin that causes people to decide to leave. And if we as a nation can look at those root causes and think about how to improve the situation to take the pressure off of immigration is the only remedy for the people who live there, will be better for all concerned. In transition to a reformed system, the League supports provision of unauthorized immigrants already in the country to earn legal status. The League supports federal payments to impacted communities to address the financial costs borne by the state and local governments with large immigration populations. The League supports the following criteria for legal immigration of persons to the United States. And the criteria include family reunification of spouses and minor children. I think I just read this. Those seeking asylum, those seeking to fill economic, business, and employment needs, those seeking an education or training in the U.S., those who do not have history of serious criminal activity. The League supports due process for all persons, including the right to a fair hearing, right to counsel, right to appeal, and right to humane treatment. The League supports improved technology to facilitate employer verification of employee status, verification of documents, including status cards and work permits with secure identities, significant fines and penalties for employers who hire unauthorized workers, improved technology for sharing information among federal agencies, more effective tracking of individuals who enter the U.S., and increased personnel at the border. The League also supports programs allowing foreign workers to enter and leave the U.S. to meet seasonal or sporadic labor needs. In achieving overall policy goals, the League supports a system for unauthorized immigrants already in the U.S. to earn legal status, including citizenship, by paying taxes, learning English, studying civics, and meeting other relevant criteria. While policy reforms, including a path to legal status, remain unachieved, the League does not support deporting unauthorized immigrants who have no history of criminal activity. When I was appointed the LWVUS board liaison to LWV New Mexico, our neighbor to the west, I became aware of some of the serious concerns about the adequacy of our national position. There are some inconsistencies in the LWVUS position. In one place, it speaks of legal admission for people who didn't have a history of serious criminal activity. In another place, it speaks of not deporting unauthorized immigrants who have no history of criminal activity. And yet no one anticipated the atrocities of the Trump administration in separating children from their parents or investigating a wait in Mexico plan for immigrants seeking asylum, or sending children as young as 2 or 3 years old to appear before a judge and plead their case not to be deported. The Trump administration used citations such as a broken taillight to arrest and deport people who had been given legal permanent residency after being vetted as if they were going to apply for citizenship. The problems with our immigration system are so enormous that it seems like they can't be overcome. And so I'd like to spend the rest of my time talking a little bit about some ideas that were put forward by a professor of law at Benjamin Cardozo Law School. Peter Markovitz is his name. And he was a co-founder of the Catherine Greenberg Immigration Justice Clinic. This article has been updated but the thrust of it's been published in the Yale Law Review and in this publication by the Center for American Progress. I don't think there's anything more frustrating than knowing that we have a problem, we as citizens, but not knowing where to begin. So I'll take Markowitz's list of revisions and discuss the background and what can be done. Probably Markowitz's strongest recommendation is that every person who goes to immigration court must have court-appointed legal representation if he is unable to hire an attorney. Immigrants who have legal representation in their cases win their case 85 to 90% of the time. Immigrants without legal representation win only 10 to 15% of the time. Judges have said how distressing it is for them to try a case with an unrepresented child who can barely have their feet touch the floor when they're in the witness chair. Currently, 40 to 50 immigrants in a group may be represented by one lawyer who's not given any time prior to arrival to interview the immigrants or find out if there are specific grounds for admitting the immigrant. 2, the grounds for deportation need to be simplified and streamlined. The only real basis for deportation in the law is if a person enters the U.S. unlawfully or violated the terms of their authorized visas, usually by staying beyond the time limit on their visa. Currently, there are over 300 grounds for removal. We'll come back to that in a minute. 3, judges need to have individual power of discretion, needs to be restored. Apparently they did at one time have it, but they don't now. As it is right now, the only options they have when someone comes into court is deportation or detention. Either penalty may be out of line for an immigrant who's lived in the U.S., say, for 25 years, has a citation from 24 years ago for a broken tail light on his car. He's picked up, hauled into court, and instead of putting the immigrant into detention for a couple of years or deporting him, proportional sentencing based on the individual circumstances should be allowed. The judge could impose a fine, order a certain amount of time for community service, or put the immigrant into some kind of rehabilitation program if there's a mental health or substance abuse problem. There should also be a statute of limitations for how far back an immigrant can be prosecuted for other kinds of violations. Say, might have had that citation 24 years ago, but he fixed it after he got detained, and it's unfair then 25 years later to pick him up and try to deport him. And this I found just incredible. People who receive legal permanent residency status can still be deported. And these are the people who have the strongest ties to the United States. They share unique rights and obligations, and they've already gone through the same legal vetting process that's akin to applying for citizenship. But again, if person's gotten legal permanent status, but he has that old citation, there have been incidents of people being stopped, taken into detention, and then deported. Immigration courts have, and this 5th point, immigration courts have a peculiar status in the U.S. court system. The immigration judges are not appointed by the president. They are appointed by the Attorney General and overseen by the Department of Justice. When an immigrant is brought before a judge, he is prosecuted by the Department of Justice in front of a judge who is overseen by the Department of Justice. One would think that that would be a conflict of interest for the judge, especially. And Markovitz recommends that immigration courts be made into independent courts through Article 1 of the Constitution, rather than, I think it's Article 3. That would allow another example of an independent Article 1 court are the tax and bankruptcy courts, which are established by and answerable to Congress, not the president or his attorney general. 6 among his recommendations. 6 is ICE has been spending ever increasing billions of dollars on detention and deportation in a failed experiment that was attempting to get immigrants to be more compliant with the laws, but ICE's actions have caused untold suffering in communities that have failed to increase compliance, and it's not increased compliance with the law. Not only have immigrants been brought into court on minor violations of the law, but detention or deportation, which are the only measures that a judge has at their disposal, are more expensive than some of the alternatives. And to pour salt on the wound, a number of the private prisons renewed their contracts with the Trump administration about a year earlier than was necessary, because it was reported they perceived that Trump might not win the 2020 election, and thus they wouldn't get their contracts renewed. So they went ahead and did it sooner than they had to in order to get that per diem payment from the federal government for every person who's put into their detention system. 7, migrants' compliance with the law might be boosted by cooperative strategies that give individuals a fair chance to affirmatively apply for one of the forms of legal status that Congress has made available to them. It's been reported that if a migrant might be eligible for one of those forms of legal status, the list is thrown into the room that they occupy, and they're told to look it over to see if any of the categories might apply to them. And I have not seen that list, so I don't know exactly what's on it, but I suspect it's things like if you've been a victim of gang violence, or you some other relief that Congress has provided, but the migrants generally, let me put it this way, I think I would probably have trouble reading their list of reasons why you might be able to get legal status. And I can't imagine somebody who's trying to decipher what they might be eligible for when they're in the circumstances of being in detention. 8, replace preemptive immigration detention with proven alternative mechanisms. The best way to get an immigrant to appear in court is to provide counsel and support. You know, a lot of that, what do they call it, catch and release criticism of our immigration policies have been that once somebody is caught coming into the United States without documentation and then they're released, they won't ever show up again. But if they have a lawyer, they will. And that's part of the preparation for a client before he goes into court, to know what to expect and why he has to show up. Markovitz concludes this article by saying that it will take a paradigm shift to get legislative reform. Thoughtful policymakers and advocates need to work now to develop a clear vision for the immigration enforcement system that the nation needs to build. Some important components of these recommendations could be implemented by executive order. Prosecutorial discretion guidelines could be implemented. Here are 4 things that Markovitz recommends to give better guidelines for deciding the outcome for the immigrant. To deprioritize the enforcement of removal against legal permanent residents and others who fall outside of the removal system. To disentangle immigration and criminal enforcement. I was kind of glad to see that, because originally when I started reading material about immigration, and it seemed like immigration was handled as a civil matter, and then all of a sudden it became a criminal matter, and then I couldn't understand, and I still don't understand how those lines get blurred. Thirdly, by shifting away from punitive enforcement model toward a cooperative compliance enhancement model, and that's where I come back to the Immigration and Naturalization Services versus Immigration and Customs Enforcement. I think that we have blurred over into the land of just cut and dried enforcement and not looking at services that could help people adjust and become useful residents in our country. And fourthly, begin to wind down the immigration detention demands and scale up access to counsel programs. The detention costs are so great. And if you're going to, really give individual consideration, it would be much better to spend the money on having attorneys for individuals, as opposed to trying to keep them detained unproductively. Well, Markovitz's last 2 paragraphs were, I thought, so remarkable that I just want to share them with you and then turn it back over to Gloria. Markovitz says the obstacles to meaningful immigration enforcement reform are many. Legislative paralysis, racism, xenophobia, and political cowardice are formidable barriers. Real progress can only result from a powerful, coordinated political movement led by immigrant communities themselves. That work is underway, but something is missing. Immigration reformers have yet to coalesce around an affirmative vision for immigration enforcement system that the nation needs to build. The proposal set forth here is intended as a starting point to catalyze a rigorous dialogue in search of that vision. The enforcement scheme recommended by this report would reject U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement's exclusive reliance on detention and deportation. In its place, the recommended new mechanisms of enforcement would dramatically scale back failed punitive enforcement in favor of a cooperative enforcement approach that would be both more effective and less costly. The substantive rules proposed here would make the system more workable and less brutal by reversing decades of one-way ratchet reforms that put tens of millions of people at risk of deportation, but make up only a random small minority actually subject to enforcement. This will require focusing the enforcement system by excluding from deportation those with the deepest ties to the United States, simplifying the system to make it administrable, and restoring discretion to immigration judges to do justice in individual cases. The procedural protections of appointed counsel and politically independent Article 1 immigration courts will help create a just system where individuals can reliably access the legal rights to which they are entitled. Collectively, these reforms would also significantly increase voluntary compliance rates by restoring the legitimacy of a system in which both immigrants and citizens have alike lost faith. Full realization of the paradigm shift this report recommends will require congressional action. In the current political environment, the near-term prospects for significant legislative immigration enforcement reform are uncertain at best. However, meaningful progress can be made now through executive action. The incoming Biden administration could unilaterally put in key aspects of these recommendations, including implementing the intent to initiate protocol. That means if this person who is detained because they have not entered legally, they're supposed to initiate a protocol to gain the right to stay within a certain number of months. And if they haven't done it, this is saying that the Biden administration could work it out so that the migrant is able to retroactively apply for the intent to initiate the protocol. Congress has passed about 200 provisions for special groups, reasons why people can be allowed to stay. And his recommendation is that idea of allowing the immigrant at this point in time to apply for the intent to initiate protocol could be brought into action. Congress's provisions have aided immigrants, as I was saying, in certain conditions, and yet sometimes the immigrant doesn't know that there's a provision that would help him. The concern for the lack of prosecutorial discretion guidance that deprioritizes cases involving lawfully permanent residents, or in situations where the statute of limitations would bar enforcement. Another important idea is to wind down the immigration detention system and scale up access to counsel. Such executive actions would blunt the gratuitous human suffering of unnecessary detentions and deportations, while also laying the groundwork for eventual legislative reform. Critically, implementing such executive policies upon taking office would allow the President Biden the opportunity to articulate a new vision for immigration and enforcement that is not only less costly and less brutal, but also more effective. And in doing so, he could begin to build the national consensus needed to eventually overhaul the nation's immigration laws. And thank you for listening to this rather prolonged discussion.
Thank you, Linda. That was really interesting.
Thank you.
We're going to move on with I'd like to introduce you to Chile Ornelas, Gilberto. And Chile is a member of the InterFaith Welcome Coalition. He's traveled to Mexico, to the Mexican border to take food, blankets, and clothing to asylum seekers also worked the bus station program where they took backpacks. They greeted immigrants and they gave them backpacks that would help them on their travel. But also Chili and his wife Peggy have opened their homes to refugees who are unable to travel any further. Sometimes there's medical issues. So they have been very actively involved in this. And Peggy and Chili are also members of the Comal Area. So Chili?
Hi, hello everyone, good evening. Buenas noches. Can you hear me? Can somebody give me a thumbs up?
There you go.
Okay. Hi, again, my name is Chili Ornelas. I'm honored to be here, to be one of your speakers. I am a member, like Gloria was saying, I am a member of the Comal Area League of Women Voters. And you might think, well, wait a minute, I'm a man. But as our president said earlier, there are men in the League of Women Voters. I'm in the men's department, that's all. Okay. So Gloria asked me to talk a little about the immigration issues, but she wanted me to give it a human face. And you just all listened to Linda talk about the legal aspects of the program, some of the possibilities of future programs, some of the ways that other people have presented their cases to what we need to do. I'm giving the issue of immigration a human face, a face that hopefully you'll be able to sympathize with and understand some of the issues with immigration. I realize that the League of Women Voters is addressing many very important issues. We face them today and then into the near future, especially here in Texas. Our LWVTX.org, if you look there, you'll see 2 priority issues: voting rights and elections, and the number 2 issue was redistricting and the census. If you dig deeper into the LWVTX.org, you'll find 3 urgent issues. These are redistricting, climate change and women's health, and then thirdly, healthcare for low-income Texans and the elderly. Nowhere there do you find anything about immigration. While all of these are truly noble ideals and the things that we do need to work on, as I mentioned, let me put a face to the issue of immigration. How about this? A young woman and her small child are staring into Texas after a harrowing trip from Honduras, but they're stuck in Mexico because of our Remain in Mexico policy. Fear, poverty, stress, they all surround her as she waits and waits. How about this second face? Picture a man and his 3-year-old son living in a sanctuary home in Nuevo Laredo, begging for you to give him some money so he can buy some medicines for his ill son. He's been robbed twice. He's got nothing left. Now, a third picture, a third human face, a middle-aged man and his 10-year-old son. They've survived all the odds. They're at the San Antonio bus station, and he asked to borrow your cell phone so he can call his wife in El Salvador. They haven't spoken for 2 weeks. She doesn't know, the mother doesn't know if they're alive or dead. And so you give him the phone, he makes the call, and of course, there's the crying, the laughter, the crying, the upset wife, the upset mother, the crying, the face of immigration. It's all very heartbreaking. I know that we're all concentrating on our priority, as I mentioned above, and our urgent issues and all the things that Linda was talking about. But do you seriously think that these migrants care about all these issues? No, of course not. They're stuck at the border with nothing, and they're at their survival level. If you read Maslow, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, they're at the survival level. They need organizations to help them to survive. And that is where the InterFaith Welcome Coalition comes in. As Gloria was just mentioning, Peggy and I are members of this organization. And I wanted to give you a little about what they do, how they formed. Let me back up. How they formed, what they do, and what their trying to do in this next phase of immigration. If you will remember, back in the spring and summer of 2017, hundreds of immigrants were traveling through Texas on their way into the United States. They were coming through San Antonio because it's a transportation hub, on their way to Miami, to LA, to Maine, to Washington. And so they were coming through here. Several religious organizations in our city decided to assist these individuals in whatever way they could. You see, the immigrants were staying at the bus station overnight. They were, or at the airport. They were under bridges and living on the streets. Different groups came together to pool their resources and coordinate their actions to alleviate some of these immigrant problems. A united plan had to be developed, and they had to coordinate housing and medical and food and clothing and legal and translation services and banking needs and on and on and on. The Catholic Church group, they took the lead, and the InterFaith Welcome Coalition was born. What makes up all this group? Well, let me tell you. It's comprised of churches of many denominations, of concerned individuals, foundations, legal aid groups, working pro bono, of course. And then by 2019, the spring, even the city of San Antonio joined the coalition by helping provide hotel rooms and transportation and medical, tremendous amount of help. Today, there are more than 30 different organizations in the coalition. And you might think, well, gee, 30, who's in this group? I'll tell you, I'll give you an idea. There's the American Jewish Committee, Disciples of Christ, Baptist Fellowship, Daughters of Charity, Evangelic Lutheran, Mennonite, Presbyterian, Unitarian Universalist, Raices, and on and on and on. So having looked at how Raices developed and their initial need and how they were trying to provide service for the immigrants, let's look at some of their actions, okay? And I'll give you some more faces to immigration. When it first started operating, IWC was concentrating here in the city in San Antonio. The major areas of support were at the bus station, at the airport, and providing housing for those that needed to stay overnight. Of course, providing meals and offering legal explanation and explaining how to read a bus ticket. Amazing. How to travel in the United States. They're all part of this effort that was ongoing. Interfaith Welcome Coalition, under the guidance and leadership of then Sister Denise LaRocque, started training hundreds of volunteers. They were vetting temporary homes for immigrants, lining up churches to provide meals, clothing, funds, coordinating with the local hospitals for medical needs, because some of these immigrants come here arriving sick and in need of medical help. It was very daunting, but it all came together. 2018 and parts of 2019, they're like a blur to some of the volunteers that were working with IWC. At the bus station, I'll give you an idea. At the bus station, for example, you might see 90 to 100 people go through there in the morning, another 70 to 80 that afternoon, and in the evening, another 30 or 40 in one day, every day, people just coming through. And so you can imagine how much coordination and effort was needed to keep all of this going. The airport was also very busy during all of this. Most of the migrants made their connections and moved on and went on to, like I said, Miami to St. Louis to wherever they're going. We provided advice to them, maps, backpacks to the families. As Gloria mentioned, we made many hundreds of backpacks for the families. What's in a backpack? Some food, coloring books, crayons for the kids, a dictionary, some water or a water bottle, hygiene products, what have you. And then for multiple reasons, from missing the bus, for example, just multiple reasons, some families had to stay overnight to catch the next bus the next day. So the Interfaith Welcome Coalition provided homes for these folks. These families would, volunteer families would pick up the immigrants at the bus station, take them home, feed them, house them, take care of them for the evening, and bring them back the next day to meet the bus or the airport connections or what have you. So you can imagine all the stories and the emotional connections that were made. Sometimes a family may have to stay for several days, weeks, and even months. Yeah, even months. For example, my wife and I have hosted 7 families ranging from overnight to several months. Let me show you another human face. A young mother and her ill son, they swam across the river. They're immediately caught, and like Linda mentioned, the catch and release, throw them off, get them out of here. But the 4-year-old son was turning blue and dying. After taken to a local hospital, it was determined that the little boy's heart condition was too serious for them. Both the mother and the child were heloed to the San Antonio Children's Hospital. He immediately went under heart surgery for 2 holes in his heart. The miracle baby survived. My wife and I housed the family for the mother for many months as the child recovered, and then eventually the child joined us, and finally they were allowed to travel. So that's just one face. That's by one example. There's many families that show up, and the wife is, the female may be very pregnant and goes into labor and has problems, what have you, dental problems, all kinds. So families did get to stay for several days. There are many emotional stories of courage, of perseverance, of survival. But with all the numerous good intentions and all the good deeds done by the IWC, our government was working against that. As Linda mentioned, with the Trump administration and their PPP protection protocols, all the programs of catch and release, the COVID restrictions coming in and saying, no, because of COVID, we can't let you in to even sign up. These new rules force people to apply for admission, but they had to wait in Mexico for their court date. And sometimes their court date kept changing, kept getting delayed. And meanwhile, these folks stuck on the border have to come back in, find out what's going on, find out that their date's now 3 months, 6 months, a year later, and you have to stay in Mexico, by the way. So the immigrants, once COVID really hit, they weren't even allowed in to register to get a court date. They were immediately deported. So now the immigrants had to stay in Mexico and wait and wait and wait. And of course, Mexico is a dangerous place, dangerous. The Mexican border towns have historically been known for being dangerous. Petty crime has always been there, but now kidnapping, gangs with guns, demanding money, cartels trying to control their turf, all of this added to the plight, to the face of immigration. Some of these some of these immigrants started banding together for protection, obviously. They started looking to religious organizations for help, especially with housing and for food and trying to stay alive. Let me show you a face of immigration. My wife and I often went into Mexico, as Gloria was saying, to deliver clothing and food and toys and numerous items, blankets, towels, whatever they were needing. One day in the summer of 2018, my wife and I went to visit 3 homes, 3 sanctuary homes. We got to the first one and we found 90 to 100 people living in one home. 3-bedroom. Unbelievable. We got to the second home and we found 50 to 70 immigrants trying to live there. And the third home, which was a small home, Only had about 20 to 30 people. And you think, oh my God, how can these people live this way? Can you imagine living under those conditions? In the summer, in the heat, Nuevo Laredo, little food, little hope. So here were all these men and women and children living in homes under locked doors because they're afraid of all those cartels and people out there. There had been attempted abductions of some of the young women to force them into sex trafficking. So it's horrible. I was told on one trip to go outside and look down the street. See those men down there? He said, they're lookouts for the cartel. They're leaving us alone right now because they know that you guys are with religious organizations and that you're here helping us and that we're no threat to them. We're not, a threat. Then he says to me, can you go outside and step in the middle of the street and show them your blue vest? It's kind of like the international organization or symbol for IWC, Interfaith Welcome. And it's kind of famous around the border. He says, that way they'll leave us alone. So I did. So the IWC continues to work with organizations along the border and supporting some of these sanctuary homes. And many religious and humanitarian organizations on both sides of the border, on Mexico and in the United States side of the border, they're trying to help the immigrants as much as possible. It's a humanitarian issue, guys. From El Paso to Matamoros, groups exist. And of course, all the way across Arizona, New Mexico, and California. But our group is concentrating in Texas. So that's the one that I have the most information on. IWC decided that because there were less and less people coming through San Antonio, there was less and less need here. And so they decided to expand their efforts to the border and give money to organizations along the border that were helping. So IWC, Interfaith Welcome Coalition, was vetting these organizations and determining which organizations to give them money to and support and food and what have you. To give you an idea of the financial support that they're giving them is just last year in 2020, the IWC, working through their program, their border outreach program, donated over $319,000. $319,000 in 1 year. They keep a bunch of these organizations alive. They keep hope alive on the border. Now, I wanted to tell you a little about the future. With the pandemic, obviously, it's been very hard for the organization to raise funds and to keep these other organizations on the border alive. But they've been able to keep going. As I mentioned, $319,000 a year is no chump change. It's a lot of money. Volunteers are also still needed, but of course, because of the COVID, a lot of our volunteers are not coming in till they receive the vaccination, sorry. And once that happens, hopefully we'll get some more of those back in. We expect more and more to come back into work. But with the new administration, there's also renewed hope that our programs are changing. There's many challenges ahead. Now, do you want the good news or the bad news? Well, it's kind of both. The good news is some of the
good news. We got to move on, Dave.
Some of the good news is that because of the new administration, some of the old programs of, for example, the protection protocols are being waived. In fact, just Friday last week, in San Diego, they started opening and letting people in. People that had been on court dates were being let in so to go and stay with their families or their relatives. 200 the first day, they're hoping to increase it to 500 a day. This week, here in Texas, on Monday, Matamoros started that same program. Matamoros will be allowing people to start coming in. And then on Friday, this week, El Paso will start the program and we'll start allowing people coming in. So there's a good face, a good news to immigration. The bad news is that a lot of them come through San Antonio. And so the IWC, the Interfaith Welcome Coalition, is going to have a huge challenge as, again, we go back into the mode back to 2017, 2018, where hundreds were coming through here every day. Hundreds were staying at churches overnight because there was just not enough room. Yeah, the face of immigration is going to be here in San Antonio very quickly. So lastly, I just wanted to say there's another face to immigration, and that's of all the volunteers that are in the IWC. And I see there's a few here that are members of League of Women Voters that volunteer with their homes or at the bus station or what have you. Thank you for that. That's the face of immigration also. Finally, I just wanted to say thank you. My personal thank you to Gloria and Linda. You educated me with a lot of information. Thank you. And thank you for letting me show you a face of immigration. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chili, and thank you for all you do. I tell Chili repeatedly that I live vicariously through him and Peggy and their work with the immigrant community. Since March, I have been remote learning with my granddaughter, and so it kind of keeps me tied down at home. So I truly appreciate everything that you guys do. I'm going to talk a little bit about League of Women Voters and Immigration and our update. In 1997, Texas did adopt, hi Peggy, an immigration position. And that position was really geared to what was happening in the 90s. And unfortunately, as Linda noted, all of that changed when 9/11 happened. And all of a sudden, we became even more leery of immigrants. Racial profiling just became more prevalent than before. Police stops were based on color, skin color, and language. If you spoke something other than English, you were considered a risk and followed. So as I worked, especially for me, I came onto the position as the immigration issue chair about the time all of this, right after all of this was happening and things were getting really gearing up. And it became more and more difficult to advocate. For those of you who are not familiar with how we advocate, we usually take our position, we find what we can advocate or advocate against based on our position. And sometimes I had to just go all over the place. US, when the baby jail bill came up, I literally went into childcare and the CPS regulations and things to see if we could advocate against it. Fortunately, there was such an uproar, and you league members called your representatives and said, we don't like this bill. And that bill got shelved and it never came through. But while, and then at a Christmas party with a League of Women Voters at Comal Area, we were talking about program planning, and somebody, I don't know, her name was Gloria, said something to the effect that she didn't like she couldn't work with the position and she wanted something better. And so they asked me what I thought we needed to do. And I said, I think we ought to put it in for a program study. And they did, and it passed the convention. And then we formed this committee and we looked at it. So we did the update, and Meg just texted us and said, you should never leave the party early because you're going to miss something. I left the state board meeting shortly after they voted on it, and I realized left, and sure enough, Linda, they did something without, and I didn't know. When I left, Grace said we would have a state meeting. Meg says that after I left, they decided that we didn't need a meeting because board approval was all they did, because it really wasn't a new study, it was just an update. So this is a position now. It'll be in So we will not be that whole part about having a meeting in March. That's not happening. I just kind of give you a little bit of a insight. I'm not going to read it all, but our position is going to be placed inside the original position. We're not losing any of the other stuff. Everything is important. It's just going to be added to it. And our lead into our position says the League of Women Voters of Texas recognize that immigrants bring diversity and enrichment to our state. The humane and ethical treatment of immigrants at our border is an essential part of our country's rule of order and the development of new citizens and residents. And we talk about the centers must be clean, must be healthy. There should be some medical care, that the state should provide Medicaid expansion that would include the coverage of undocumented and resident immigrants, and that immigrants, whether they're children or adults, should be provided with an attorney prior to appearing in court. Legal representation is vital to due process of the law. Linda talked about that. That is probably the most heinous thing that has happened when young 3-year-olds are told to represent themselves in court. And as we were doing this research, we saw examples of DOJ attorneys saying, oh no, they can get representation if they want to. We give them a list of names of attorneys that they can call. Well, I had extremely bright 3-year-old children and grandchildren, but to date, I don't think any one of them could have made a decision on an attorney and then called and then scheduled an appointment. It's just ludicrous. And also, we do not support racial profiling. And there was another one. And so I think that our new position is going to be one that we can work with really well. And we should, and it should come in really handy as we go into this new. You may be asking yourself, how can I make a difference? How can I advocate? What can I do to make sure that bills like SB4 don't happen again? SB4 is a hideous, I think we're going in our 3rd legislative session since it's been put in. So what can you do? Well, first of all, you can go on to the website, LWVTexas.org, go into advocacy and issues, pull down all issues, and then you have a whole array of things that you can choose from. Click on one of them. I'm hoping you're clicking on immigration, but there's health issues, there's redistricting, there's voting. And find their blog and find what the issue chairs are writing and what they're talking about. Educate yourself, see what bills they're following, and then sign up for action alerts. You will get an alert and it'll ask you to call or write your state representative. You're only going to get action alerts and for something that is federal. We don't advocate on the federal level. We only advocate on the state level. So sign up for action alerts. Follow those blogs on issues. I'm going to tell you we have some really good writers, and some of them are really wonderful blogs. And even if you're just wondering what you can do, you'll find information in there. Also, you can call me if you're interested in immigration and you want to help in that area. Give me a call, or send me a text or send me an email. I don't care. Send it by carrier pigeon. I will respond. And for me, this is an issue that is vastly important. I am only a 2nd generation American. My grandfather crossed the border. My grandparents crossed the border in the early 1900s. And when I think of the perils they encountered as they came across in a period of Texas history that was extremely violent against Mexican people. It breaks my heart. And so for me, this is an important issue. It's important for me not only for Hispanics, but for anyone who immigrates into this country. This is what this country was based on. It was founded by immigrants, and no one has a right to claim it's just theirs. So anyone who wants to participate, give me a call. Let me know. You got the little handbooks. My name's in there. I'm
Gloria-
also the membership chair, so you can find me in the first couple of pages.
Gloria,
that?
there are people here who aren't members. You want to type your email address? And
Oh, well, that's okay. Okay, that's fine. You can do that.
you
I think
type it.
Roxanne's going to put my email in the chat box. Oh, you want me to? Okay.
Yeah, so I'd get it right.
We have more trouble with my email address. It
And,
tends to go to Ohio if you're not careful.
and also Chile, for people who might want to volunteer, if you don't mind, would you put your email address in the chat?
No problem. I can do that.
I'm gonna put my phone number because
Okay.
I don't care if people call me. I like to talk to people.
If anyone has any
So
questions,
feel free.
Please put it in the chat of either of any of our speakers. Gloria, do you anticipate the Texas legislature? They have a lot on their plate. Are they going to take up any immigration issues that you're aware of?
Well, they already have a few. Medicaid for immigrants and for undocumented and also resident immigrants. There's that bill has already been filed. There's one on driver's license, which I think is vastly important, allowing immigrants and undocumented to be able to get a driver. People driving without a driver's license, you can almost count on them not having insurance. And if they get into an accident, you know what it is, you end up having to bear the brunt of that expense. So ensuring them to have a driver's license makes insurance. So if for no other reason, that one alone should be something that we are, and we're following that, and that's something, and that's one that we're going to advocate for. That one and the Medicaid. We have several immigrant groups, but we think those are really important. We come out anything on prisons being built. I call them prisons. They like to call them detention centers. Detention centers being built, and a lot of times those go through the Texas legislature, so we're keeping an eye open for that. Anything really heinous tends to happen toward the end of the session, just before they can file that last bill or two. That's usually where they show up. So that's when we get really vigilant.
Okay.
But I think all in all, because they started late, they're running late, they may not push that many, but either way, I mean, you got to keep an eye on them no matter what.
In the comments, Edna was on Facebook, and she says it's important also to work with employers in the United States. They are the main reason why we cannot stop illegal immigration. Meanwhile, we have employers who get benefits from all the people. The problem will be there forever. One of the biggest home builders in San Antonio hires illegal workers. They pay much less to them without any benefits. It's not fair. The need for a workforce is real, but it needs to be fair for all. And even if you are here in a legal way, there are many foreign workers who work here without any medical insurance. Which I guess
the other problem that undocumented I don't like the term illegal. I use undocumented. That undocumented worker space is that a lot of times employers refuse to pay for the jobs done. So what happens is they come in, they work for a week or two, and then when they go get their paycheck, they do anything. They can't go to the police. They can't file a lawsuit. You know, they're scared they're being sent back. And so what do? They go to another job and hope to God that they get paid. So yeah, I think that's a really important issue. We should be looking at that. I'm going to make sure I have that on my notes for something to look at, for a bill that would somehow or another regulate this better. And a lot of times what happens, the person that gets punished is the undocumented person. The person who hires them just goes, you know, scot-free, turns around and hires somebody else. And a lot of times it's documented because they can't pay them less. They can get away with not paying them at all. And it's just not right. And it's not fair. And it's not who we ought to be.
Well, Chile, Gloria, Linda, thank you so much for bringing us such great information, and beyond the information, Chile, making us feel and see the people through your passion. So I appreciate that. And Gloria, I know you and Linda have different ways of expressing, but I can feel your passion for this topic too, that we need to take better care of our brothers and sisters. So next month, our program will be on health care in Texas. Unfortunately, we rank 47th in the nation. I mean, here we are, you know, they were saying last week we're the state with the most power, and we lost power. Well, we have the most money, the most this, the most that, and the worst healthcare outcomes, and almost the worst health comes in the nation. So we'll be talking about that problem next time. So thank you all so much for attending.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks.
Thank you, Roxana.
Thank you. Thank you.
I'm just stopping. You don't have
Y'all
to
take care now. Good night.
Okay.